quick little review on this skull. The orbital fossa. Right, hope that, I wonder if you could see there, good, right there, so, yep, that's good there. Right, bone structures, orbital fossa. Right, bone structures of the orbital fossa. Orbit. Now, you have four margins: superior, lateral, medial, inferior. Of the orbit obviously is the house for the eyeball and some other structures. The 1, 2, 3, 4 margins, right? They're made up of the various different bones of the bones here: the frontal bone, the zygomatic bone, maxillary bone, lacrimal bone, sphenoid. So, alright. So the superior margin of the orbit is derived from the frontal bone. This is the frontal bone coming down here. Superior margin is from the frontal bone. Lateral margin is from the zygomatic bone. The inferior margin here is from the maxillary bone. Medial margin is from the piece of the medial margin is made of the lacrimal crest. So you have the lacrimal crest of the maxilla and the lacrimal crest of the anterior lacrimal crest of the maxilla, and the posterior lacrimal crest, which is looks a little bit from the frontal bone as well as the lacrimal bone. Right, so that is for the margins. Now, at the superior margin here, you have the supraorbital notch here. Inferiorly here, you have the infraorbital foramen. Right, you have walls: superior wall, lateral, medial and inferior walls. So the walls made up of obviously the top part here, the frontal bone. So the orbital part of the frontal bone here. Laterally from the zygomatic bone, as well as the greater wing of the sphenoid bone, lesser wing of the sphenoid bone, posteriorly, you see there? Posteriorly, also part of the lesser wing of the roof. The roof would be from the, as we say, from the frontal bone, and you go posteriorly, more posteriorly with sphenoid, lesser wing of the sphenoid. So all this would be the roof. Lateral wall, as we say just now, would be the zygomatic bone, and more laterally and more medially and posteriorly would be the greater wing of the sphenoid bone. Base of the orbit would be from the maxillary bone. This is the maxillary bone right here. Orbital part of the maxillary bone. Medial wall would be from the orbital part of the ethmoid bone, as well as the lacrimal bone, as well as a little piece from the maxilla ascends over here to form the lacrimal crest, as we say, and the anterior lacrimal crest, and you have the posterior lacrimal crest. Right, coming down the arching of the frontal bone coming down here. So that's for the wall. As they say, the orbit is like a pyramid, right? Four-sided pyramid. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Superior, lateral, medial, inferior, and it goes posteriorly, and the pyramid is tilt like this. So this is here, pyramid is tilt like this. Lateral, tilts lateral and inferior, so it will project posterior, lateral and superior, lateral and superior. So it project posteriorly, and if you was to project the two lateral walls posteriorly, you would end up in the and you go posteriorly from that point, you would find the pituitary fossa, hypophyseal fossa. Right. So you have the structures within the orbit would include the fissures and the whole foramens, which would be from medial to lateral, then inferior would be from this wall is pretty bashed up, but you have anterior and posterior ethmoidal foramen. So from medially going laterally, you'll have anterior ethmoid foramen, posterior ethmoid foramen, optic canal, superior orbital fissure, inferior orbital fissure, inferiorly, intraorbital groove coming anteriorly, and infraorbital foramen, continuation of that groove. Obviously, you have a lot of important structures coming through the fissures. Through the optic canal runs the optic nerve. So that is the optic canal there, right there. So you have the optic nerve running through, and covering it would be the sheath. It would be continuous with the periosteum of the orbit. Goes posteriorly, covering the optic nerve through the optic canal to go back and blend with the meninges. Right? I think that's of some surgical importance. Some measurements, you must know that anterior crest, from the anterior lacrimal crest to the anterior ethmoid foramen is approximately 24 millimeters. From the anterior ethmoid foramen to the posterior ethmoid foramen is 12 millimeters, and from the posterior ethmoid foramen to the optic canal is from that to the optic canal is 6 millimeters. So you have 24, 12, and 6 millimeters. The lateral wall as well as the medial wall is 5 centimeters, approximately 5 centimeters. Medial to the medial wall, medial to the medial bone wall, we would have ethmoid A sinuses. So the anterior ethmoidal A sinus, middle and posterior ethmoidal A sinus, and then more posteriorly you would have the sphenoid A sinus, posteriorly, inferiorly. Superior to the roof, right, of the orbit, would have on top here would be the anterior cranial fossa, and over that we'll obviously have the frontal lobe of the brain. Lateral, this foramen here, this fissure here, inferior orbital fissure, would continue. If you were to look here, see here, would continue posteriorly and inferiorly to the infratemporal fossa and the pterygopalatine fossa. And yeah, so yeah, you could see that there, right? This here, what you're looking at is the inferior orbital fissure coming into the pterygopalatine fossa, which is in the infratemporal fossa. Right. and yeah. And if you was to go posterior from the superior orbital fissure there posteriorly, you would end up in the middle cranial fossa. So there's the middle cranial fossa here, anterior cranial fossa and posterior cranial fossa. Alright, that's about it.